Welcome to the R.O.Hammer Company's podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by a gentleman I've really grown to love, Lucas Brown from Saige Analytics. Also pleased to announce that CSI and Saige Analytics have entered into a joint IP development project. Very excited about that. Also wearing my snazzy shirt in honor of Lucas today. If you don't know Lucas, this is going to be a great opportunity for you to get to know him, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Lucas, how are you today?
Hey, John. Thanks for having me and doing good.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining. I've been looking forward to this interview we scheduled it about a month ago now, it feels like.
Good.
I got lots of questions. Before we kind of dive into filling my needs, why don't you tell our guests a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Lucas Brown with Saige Analytics. I am originally from, I was born in Texas, kind of grew up in Southern Illinois and Southeast Missouri. I have been based in St. Louis for almost 25 years now. So St. Louis has kind of been home. It's the longest place, it's the place I've lived the longest. And yeah, I have been in credit collections pretty much the whole time I've been in St. Louis. That was one of the reasons I moved to the big city, was better job opportunities. You know, I grew up in pretty small towns and really thought that there was better opportunities, and lo and behold, I ended up at a collection agency in St. Louis and started my career, and really never looked back. I started in collections in, I guess it would have been October of 2000. I started as a collector on the phones. I'm working for Roger Weiss. I know many people who check out the podcast may be familiar with him.
Sure.
And had really a tremendous kind of growing experience, not just in collections, but it was really my first job that was a real job. Going into an office, it wasn't working at a deli or a restaurant or anything like that. And so, a lot of it was growing about, growing and learning about collections, but also just about what it means to work in an office, what matters. How do you excel? How do you kind of grow, climb the ladder, things like that. And I would experience, I kind of rose through the ranks at CACI working for Roger. And I guess I worked with him almost 14 years and learned a ton. And that's really kind of what got me going.
Time flies, doesn't it?
It does. It's what got me going in St. Louis, and it's also what got me going in collections, and then that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at.
Cool. Where in Texas were you born? You said? Okay. Cool.
My parents like to remind me that the hospital I was born in has been turned into a mental institution.
Okay. All right.
So they question if that's what some of my problems stem from.
That's funny. That's funny. I'm always very interested to see how people end up in the arms space too. It's one of those industries where no one sets out to, you don't go to college to get a specific degree to head into debt collections. There are some pretty smart people though. We've got to interact quite a bit over the past month, and I think you fall into that club, so welcome. Yes, it's great to have you. I have a similar kind of path to, was intended to be like a summer job type thing for me, and here we are 20 years later, I guess. Yeah,
absolutely. Collections is one of those jobs, and I still feel like I can say this, and I hope I can say it for a long time still, and that is that for an entry-level position to be able to come in and be a collector or a client support representative or something like that, you can make a really good living and really, learn a lot right at an entry level, and especially if you can be in a position where you can earn bonuses and things like that. And that's really what got me hooked is I was going to school for computer science, and I was wanted a good job that I could work at while I was doing night school. I started realizing, I'm like, man, I'm, with bonuses and everything, I could probably make as much as I was hoping to make, doing networking and,
Sure.
working and things like that. I was like, and, it's kind of fun. Like, we have contests and, everybody, it's like a lively kind of environment. I'm not falling asleep at my desk or anything like that. And I, I think that is one special thing about the industry is it is a, can be a call center type environment, but it's one where you really become close knit with the people that you work with. And whenever you can find success, it's usually there's usually a few ways that you can be rewarded with that. And I that really just connected with me, and I was inspired both as a collector, but then I was inspired to like share that with other people and motivating a team and teaching people how to collect successfully and compliantly and with respect to consumers. And for those that do know Roger, know that he's very big on training and, is very passionate about just, education in general. And so that was really the culture that I spent my first 5 years, especially doing in operations, is really being passionate about both learning myself, but then also, kind of finding my way and realizing that I really had fun motivating and helping other people be successful. And then I was kind of off from there. Then that's kind of what got me into, it's like, okay, now I can be a team lead and help us hit our goals. And now I can be an evening supervisor, and then, an operations manager, and so on and so forth. So I'm very thankful that I had that experience coming into the industry, because I still, 25 years later, whenever I'm working on an analytics project or whatever, I'm always thinking about like the collector sitting there trying to do a very hard job that can be very stressful. Every month you start at zero and you're expected
Yep.
to perform. Not many jobs are like that. And so I like finding ways to, still kind of think about that person sitting there and say, what would they do with the tool that I'm providing? Or what would they do if their supervisor or manager like shows them some data that we provided? Really having a fairness and a helpful kind of thought towards those types of roles. I think that they're the most important jobs in collections many times, and
Front line. Yeah.
line 100%.
Yeah, it is a double-edged sword, very rewarding but challenging and stressful. Takes a kind of a unique personality to do it as well. I also think it's very interesting, your skill set. You mentioned that you were going to school for computer science, and then you got involved in the debt collection space. Bringing technology to the accounts receivable management world is not a new thing, but there are some pretty massive changes happening in the industry. Analytics, data in general, is becoming a very important piece of the puzzle, which is perfect for you. It's right up your alley. You want to tell us a little bit about how you made kind of the transition from the frontline or management into the data and analytics piece of the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my journey in many different phases really depended upon a work environment and a culture that inspired learning, that was, people helping each other figure things out and giving people who didn't know, have certain knowledge, a chance to learn it, is really how I got started on my journey. And what I mean by that is, as I was going through my operational journey through management leadership, I think there was probably a point in there where I was like, my career goal is to run a 500 person call center. Just like, what's the top of that kind of role? And that's kind of where I started putting my eyes towards it.
That's great.
And then as I was going through and, becoming more responsible for certain creditor portfolios and certain performance metrics, and, also wanting to help the team like hit bonus and make sure that they were, being able to do things like identifying what collectors were high performing and which ones just were good at post dates, and kind of like not to be punitive towards one or the other, but just to like help you figure out how to coach them and like how to help them. Like, hey, you've got a great bank built. What you need to get bigger down payments when you start your arrangement and things like that. So just starting to unlock and realize that data could be really meaningful in how we like talk internally, but then also how we can forecast and have more confidence that we'll land where we're going to be. So that at the end of the month, and that is really what drove me to start going, okay, how can I get my hands on this data within the collection system? How can I get it exported into a CSV or Excel? Started learning pivot tables. I started learning formulas and calculations that I could put in there, trending. Really started becoming more and more fascinated with that. And that, I think the leadership team, the senior leadership team at the time, kind of recognized my technical abilities, that I was starting to like be able to deal with things in operations that normally we would have to put on the backlog with our programmer, and things like that. And I think the real pivotal moment for me was, they made the decision to invest in a new collection platform, a new dialer. Then they were also going to bring in some modeling tools so that we could build our own predictive. And they needed someone from operations to sort of champion, all of this integration and all of this setup. And they're like, hey, we want to move you. We're actually going to take you out of operations and managing people. And we want you to really kind of be the project manager and make sure that all this stuff that we're investing in, we can actually operationalize and use, and it's put in right. You already know all our strategies, so you can, test them and everything. And so, the software that we chose had some, a lot of software. It had a lot of SQL backend. And so through that project and some helpful programmers who tolerated their annoyance with me and saying, help this guy because he does seem kind of smart, started kind of showing me around like a SQL server, started showing me around like what's a cube, what's different ways that you can like look at data, what is different ways that you can join and index and make things faster, and all that type of stuff. And I was constantly looking at the data, but then looking at it as with our strategy on one side and saying, does this data match up to what we are supposed to be doing? Does this data help us find a different way of doing things? And constantly kind of having that operational mindset of, what is actually going to happen with these tools once we put them in the wild. And that's where I got hooked. And I had the opportunity to kind of continue going down that path and ended up leading an analytics and business intelligence team, and, really kind of combining those skills into, even in operations, being able to kind of self-drive without having to depend on, programmers and everything like that to be able to get things done. And that's really what hooked me, was being able to come to a meeting, whether it's with an external customer, an internal collector, or, my boss, and come to them with an idea. But the idea wasn't just something that I cooked up in my head and was my gut telling me what to do, but was actually based on data, and I could pull it up and show them why I made that decision. I just recognized how much that resonated with people, how much it was harder to kind of not pick my idea if it was data backed. And I think that that's a lot of what kind of inspired me to keep going down that path.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think there are a lot of, well, it doesn't even have to be analytics. I think there are a lot of really smart vendors out there who have had less exposure to our industry, which has a lot of moving parts. And for somebody who has the operational experience, or even like straight collector experience, it's a unique perspective. You understand the moving parts that are trying to be analyzed, and then you spoke to, operationalizing that data is one of the most important pieces too. It makes it a lot easier if you understand the full process. I think I have conversations quite frequently about analytics, and most people want to talk about the analytics that center around like digital communication strategies. I liked that you mentioned a couple of things about, there was almost some personality type analytics. There's a lot of data, setting aside the digital communications components of it, that happen in a collection agency that people aren't taking advantage of, or aren't taking advantage of it in an efficient way. I think we also talked a little bit about how we're at such a unique place in human history. Data is maybe more important than it ever has before. When you work with agencies or businesses and you're looking at what should be analyzed and how it should be analyzed, what are some like low-hanging fruit type items that you usually identify to start with?
I'm less surprised just because I've run across it frequently, but I think that there are a lot of ideas and like low-hanging fruit in a lot of agencies where they're like the obvious decisions. So like, for example, someone visited your website and didn't pay. Somebody paid your creditor and you get it on a client report. Somebody, it's like these obvious sort of, or maybe just a mystery payment shows up in the mail because of a letter that they found and they just sent in $50. All of those like little kind of obvious things sometimes get buried under the ability to access it. And so sometimes where you can start is just thinking about like even just basic rule-based stuff that you think is obvious, just like making sure, are you following up if somebody like reports, if there's a client reported payment, do you follow up on that like the next day or even the same day if you can? If somebody, visits a website, how fast does your system give you that, or your vendor give you that data, and can you action on it the same day or within a couple hours, or are you taking days to be able to get back with that consumer? So I think that there's like some really kind of low hanging fruit that really is more about how are you accessing your data overall. I think that in the past, and this is very much based on my own experience, but it has been my experience at several places I've worked at. And that's that you really, there was a period of time where I think we expected collection systems and software platforms to be like the one size fits all. Oh, like, this company is going to figure it out. I'm just going to keep adding and adding and adding. And I think that all of the new technology and features and abilities and capabilities, certainly there's some that are doing a good job of trying to kind of integrate and aggregate that. But still, you're dealing typically in most agency shops, more than 5 vendors, sometimes with just for your operation stuff. You're dealing with multiple vendors, your agents and your core kind of compliance and regulatory stuff is handled in your system. But then you have all this other data that, a lot of the integration that has happened has been for compliance reasons. Like it's like, oh, we got a bankruptcy flag. Let's make sure we get that posted on the account as fast as possible so we can make sure it's not in the dialer flag. Like those things seem to get a lot of attention and they get handled right up front.
Reactionary,
very reactionary, very risk managed, mitigating risk, which is important. But I think that there's a lot of product that gets, there's a lot of opportunity that gets left on the factory floor by having that approach. And, you kind of get to this point where you're like, well, even if I wanted to bring in all the data that I'm getting, what do I do with it? How do I kind of like have it make sense next to my other data? And so I think that that's really the opportunity that I think about a lot is there are many, many ways that you can use your data today. Kind of establishing, that you mentioned like digital communication and kind of tying in what a consumer's journey might look like and how it's working and things like that. Certainly those are the types of things that you can do. I think that just having a plan for how you're organizing and storing your data overall, regardless of if, you're going to do everything all at once or you're just going to kind of start and build towards it. I think that is the best thing that you could possibly be doing, just because then you're ready for, maybe we don't even know what's going to come out in the next 2 years. That's going to be another new technology or something that we can all use. Guess what? You're going to need data for it. You're going to need, to be able to have an adaptable kind of environment that you can incorporate that. And you have to say, are the vendors that I'm working with ready for that? Or do I need to kind of manage that for myself and make sure that I'm ready for it and kind of open up that flexibility to kind of deal with whoever you want to deal with? But then you have like the single source of truth that you can run your business with. I think real opportunity.
Yeah, that's smart advice. I think there are still a lot of agencies out there they're not using digital communications, text and email, to communicate with consumers, and they're maybe working towards that. But I would agree whether you are trying to begin analyzing right this minute, you should start building an infrastructure so that you at least have access to the data, because at some point it's going to become 100% necessary. I still see, and everyone's at different phases, but I still see agencies who can't answer, like, what is your average agent wrap time? Mm-hmm. Like, what's the average length of a conversation that your collectors have? And, make it more granular. Like, for this client, how many contacts per attempt do you get? What's the average wrap time? And what is the, what percentage pay over the phone? What percent pay on your portal after a right party contact? Those are some, they seemingly easy things, and there are products out there, off the shelf that can help you do that. But not a lot of people, it's surprising, are taking advantage. So interesting stuff. I do want to dive in and learn a little bit more about Saige Analytics, but I know that you also were at Attunely for a bit. You want to tell us a little bit about your kind of continue your path to Attunely, and tell us a bit about what you learned there?
Sure, absolutely. I did have an important step kind of between my collection agency work and then working with Attunely, and that was several years that I spent working at U.S. Bank.
Yes.
In credit card charge off, and I led the inventory management team, which was heavy on analytics, as far as just deciding. I'd say the most meaningful and kind of fun project that I worked on through the years there was really helping with designing the decision architecture and like how are we going to make decisions whenever we see someone, you know, in the later stage delinquency buckets. How are we going to make decisions on whenever things do charge off? What do we sell? What do we place with legal right away? What do we keep in house for our internal team? What do we send out to our agency partners? You know, making all those decisions, because every one of those has a variety of impacts. You know, the best solution for this month's number is just sell everything, right? If you just sell everything, you're gonna have a big, you know, payday this month, but you're gonna lose, you know, the 5 year revenue that you'll kind of give up by doing that is significant. So,
Yeah.
you know, finding the right dial to make sure that we're managing that credit loss with, you know, making sure that the agency partners, you know, have a good opportunity to be successful along with our internal team. All of those, there were just so many of these little, you know, impacts to whatever decision that we made. You know, I really enjoyed kind of managing that sales process, managing, you know, decision there. And it really got me closer to, really got me closer to how can you really operationalize these options so that they're flexible, dynamic. You know, we would make a decision in a meeting yesterday and my team would go to work executing on that plan. And then this morning, somebody from higher up in corporate was like, hey, we need to produce this money off of our sale or something like that. And then suddenly, you know, you have to be really flexible and say, okay, we had it set here. Now we got to adjust it here. What are those impacts? And you have to be able to do that within hours, not days. You know, sometimes you're lucky if you have more than 1 hour to do it, to be able to.
How accurate were you able to be? Did you have it really dialed in where your forecasts were?
We did a great, and it wasn't just me. It was working with the whole executive team, but we did get very good at kind of figuring out where we needed to land. We would update, you know, regularly, especially as the month was closing. And there was a really tight communication and alignment across many areas to make sure that it happened, just because it was such an important, critical process in the bank.
Yeah.
So just seeing that and seeing how you could have this highly complex environment where there's people all over the country, you know, working together on different teams to make this happen. And then all of you have to align on decision making. That was a really good learning experience for me, because it got me realizing the value of being a salesperson, you know, in some ways, because there were many times different opinions. And so how do you make sure that the opinion that you think is best, how do you back that up and make sure that your idea is kind of picked? So that was a great experience at US Bank, and really, you know, got me more involved in pre-delinquency, got me more involved in a lot of different types of channels and a lot of different type of work. And then from there, I had the opportunity to join a machine learning startup based out of Seattle, which was exciting. And that was Attunely. It was really a perfect fit. I'll be honest, when I was leaving the bank, I was like, is this my exit from the industry? I was like, I'm kind of burnt out. I'm really excited about analytics. I feel like I need to get into a different industry to really leverage my analytic, to really grow as an analytics professional and really get deeper. I kept thinking about all of the work that I had done with predictive analytics, and I really wanted to like dive deeper into that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was really the stars aligned, because here was this team of super smart data scientists, backed by venture capital. And the one thing that they were missing was domain expertise. They did not have a lot of domain expertise on the team, with people who'd been in operations, who knew how to take what their output from the data science team was and actually get agencies and creditors and debt buyers to use what they were producing and measuring the value and the impact of using the tools and the products. And so I had an opportunity to really, kind of be in between this like really smart, high level, everybody on our team was like senior engineers, PhD data scientists, you know, with a lot of M&A experience and, you know, trying to build like a multi-million-dollar corporation and things like that. And so just learning from those people, but then also feeling like I could contribute in a lot of ways on helping them think about the industry and helping them think about what customers want. And then being able to take that and then work with customers so closely. You know, I worked with over 50 different companies through my tenure at Attunely, and that was an eye-opening experience just to like sit there and like work with people, whether it's even just in the sales process and putting together proposals, or going all the way into delivering machine learning models and then, you know, figuring out the best ways to operationalize them. That was just a tremendous experience, being able to just be exposed to all of those differences, and really led me to, you know, to say, to, you know, the Saige Analytics project that I'm on now, which is, you know, we really recognized that there was a ton of value that we were kind of creating as part of the delivering these scores and delivering these models in just, you know, in order to have a machine learning pipeline, you have to have really fast data. You have to have good data. You have to have automated pipelines. You have to have data quality checks. You have to make sure that the model's using, you know, you don't have anything messed up with, like, are you telling the model who actually paid? And then that's what's getting ranked the scores. There's tons of analysis that kind of has to happen with the input and the output going into these types of systems. And so we had this really robust architecture. It was, you know, where I kind of landed on it was, I think that just having data set up in this type of environment can open up many possibilities. Dynamic machine learning is one of them. But I think that, you know, these systems and architectures are not inexpensive. And so I think where I, you know, really have spent a lot of time thinking is, there is so much you can do with it beyond, in addition to, you know, having dynamic machine learning models and decisioning, and to really kind of think about ways to exploit that and complement each other, just really got me more and more excited. I was like, okay, I think that there's an opportunity here where, you know, I think that a lot of people would like to do predictive analytics. A lot of people would like to do, you know, sort of real-time dashboards, real-time insights. A lot of people, you know, want to be able to work with their vendors to, you know, if you have a voice bot or if you have a digital strategy, to be able to get decisions back to those tools as quickly as possible. And what do you need for all of that? And that's really, you know, the right architecture and setting it up to where it's cost effective. And then you have the ability to kind of plug in all these things on top of it. And that's really where that was the catalyst for really forming the Saige Analytics team, and where we spend a lot of our time doing that work.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I kept hearing, it became clear that we needed a more robust analytics capabilities, and we have some internal assets, not to your level maybe, and we're making progress. And I think some of it is like, you don't know what you don't know, bouncing ideas off of people in our network. And we kept hearing this name, Lucas at Saige Analytics. You should really reach out to Lucas. And we finally made our way to Saige. And we've learned a lot already. I think we're very early, but we're learning a lot. For people who don't know Saige Analytics, you want to just tell us a little bit about the company and what you guys do, where you're at?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're less than a year old. We are, you know, I would say that we are in a place where a lot of the work that we do is consulting. A lot of the work that we do has either an active project or an aspirational project out there for some type of machine learning. You know, so the goal is always, how can we leverage ML and AI in what sits on top of whatever we build? And so we're always kind of thinking about the adaptability, the integration opportunity, the open, you know, kind of architecture and structure of everything. And so in all of our projects, typically we are designing and constructing cloud infrastructure. Sometimes we do some work where we work on premise for, you know, just kind of getting people set up and you know, get kind of a proof of concept of what it might look like on what your speeds and performance is today, but then, you know, have these aspirational targets. So we spend a lot of time, you know, working on the infrastructure side, but I think that it's really a means to an end, because the work that we get most excited about and the work that we deliver the most value with and see customers really kind of have that inflection point is once you do all that work and you have this system, and then you start plugging in things on top, and you say, hey, suddenly now we're able to look today, and every single day we can rank our entire inventory on the expected value or the propensity or the whatever. And you can actually change those rankings based on new behavioral signals that you're ingesting from all these different vendors. And you can also kind of tune collection curves over time where, collections is not always just it's your best performance at the very beginning, and then it just slowly goes down. I think overall that's certainly true. But if you look at the consumer level, it's more like a wave. I think people, and if you really kind of stay consumer centric and think about people's lives and think about consumers, people have different life experiences where they may be going through spells of poverty. They may be, they're maybe having a healthcare issue or something like that. There's many, many reasons why someone ends up in collections.
Yeah, it's cyclical. Yep.
Absolutely. Yep. And just being able to identify, a lot of the work that we do deals with anonymized records, but you could still kind of detect, certainly you're looking at what type of debt it is. You're looking at the different outreach that has occurred with the person. You're looking at the different signals from their responses and how they responded, and what was the content, all of those types of things, being able to bring it together and into like a clean decision code that says, here's what you should do with this account today, I think is really powerful. And I think even if you kind of start off and there's some things that need to be tweaked, it's always like, it's a trust building kind of process that's, I find, to be really healthy for the culture and really healthy for any of our customers that we work with, because you're kind of all going down this path of following science and saying, okay, let's look at what the data is telling us. Let's look at what the output of the decisions that we're making, and does it make sense? Where do we think there should be tweaks, and kind of going through to make it's like a compressing charcoal into a diamond.
Yeah.
And then you get closer and closer. And then, after a couple iterations, you have a really strong holistic that works across all creditors and, all that kind of stuff. You have a really consistent way of making decisions in your business that gives you confidence that you're going down the right direction.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that same kind of connection of like showing somebody how to get a payment full on the first phone call whenever I was a team leader is the same excitement that I get from showing somebody, hey, look at this opportunity in your inventory. And then they start attacking it and there's results like that.
Yeah.
I get the same excitement, that I got from those days.
Yeah, no, that's great. The ROI is tangible.
Yep.
That's nice. I think one of the things that I think about, we were probably, 90 days into our build and kind of road mapping. And one of our biggest concerns was not building anything that would have to be unwound. And we were trying to be, take a thoughtful approach and make sure that we were accounting for the ability to implement data sets that don't exist yet, like those types of things. And we realized, for what we were trying to achieve, there are a handful of agencies maybe in the country that are doing these types of things. We needed expertise, guidance, and we spoke with a lot of people. We spent a lot of time kind of telling our story, what we were trying to achieve, and we spoke with some very smart people who had great ideas. But when we finally sat down with you and Rob, one of the things was we didn't even tell you anything. You just explained what you thought we should do, and it was exactly what we had spent like 90 days trying to find the answers to. It was exciting for us. I think one of the things I keep going back to is some other vendors don't see the whole picture, and I think your kind of growth through the collection industry from collector to manager to analytics developer has served you very well, and that it kind of separates you in this industry without a doubt. I am curious to know, as a business owner too, setting aside the analytics, like what does a day look like for you at your company? Like, what do you do? Every day is a little different. I would imagine you'd probably say the same for yourself. Yeah.
I would say every day involves something where, I imagine at some point, if I can make all this work, or our team can make all this work, and we become more and more successful, it'll probably be harder for me to have as much time with hands on keyboard. But I really my goal, like where I find the most inspiration and creativity is making sure that I'm part of the work, as well as, making sure that we're out there talking to people about what we're doing, and, kind of looking for new opportunities that we could, partner with different companies. So, I say all that to say that I really enjoy that every day I get to do analytics engineering work, and do analytics work, and collaborate with a really smart team who's also, working on different areas, whether it's data science or more data engineering, to just get data moving through the system faster. So I enjoy that work very much. Um, I also spend time, following up with email, talking to people who I've met with before about projects, kind of doing the networking and sales follow-up type of activities, which
Yep.
was probably the most out of my comfort zone whenever I started all this, but it's a skill that, I don't know if I'll ever be comfortable with, but what I am getting better at is I'm getting better at not having my feelings hurt.
Yeah.
It's like you try to use your empathy, and you're like, look, I've been on the other side 100 times too. And you do get busy. And even when you want a project to go forward, or you want it to work, you're not sure when you can do it. Maybe you haven't convinced everyone on the team that it's a good investment. Like, there's many reasons, or you just get busy. Like, that also just happens. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned through that aspect of my job is to just be gracious with people, and understand that I get in the same situation sometimes. And it's like, it's all business, and things. I enjoy the people part of that aspect. And I think that that's what's most important is I think people do remember, even if you don't end up working together, they do remember how you talked to them, how you treated them, that maybe you said something funny, or you were a nice person. And I think that at in any of those interactions, that's what I always try to focus on. So part of my day doing analytics engineering, I spend part of my day kind of sales and prospecting. And then I also try to spend, and this was probably more how it breaks out across a whole week instead of each day. But then another thing that I try to do is just keep up on new tools, and new things that are popping up, and trying to consider, like, oh, how can we integrate this into into what we're already doing? Does this help? Does this not help? Are we using the right tool? Hey, check out this new tool. So it's trying to just keep the finger on the pulse with what's happening, and how cost structures. There is something about this type of work, and with data and AI and infrastructure. It can be really tough to, like, even understand, like, how much things cost, and how much.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like it's intentionally set up that way. I don't know. But I spend a lot of time trying to unwind that, so that when I'm working with somebody, I have factual kind of things that I've done that says, I know this costs more than this because I've done it and I've seen it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. We struggle with that a bit too. And I think for us, and I don't have the level of expertise in this area that you do, I think the easiest way for us to understand was we started doing some analysis about what it would take for us to hire the people with the skills to build what we wanted. And that was kind of the easiest path to be like, yes, it's not cheap by any means,
Yeah.
but the upside is big.
That's right. And that's a really important point. So, I think that the thing that I try to make sure and remind people is, I can show you some really interesting stuff, and I could show you some things that are, like, kind of mind blowing, with, like, speeds, or ways that you can, like, evaluate data, or, all of that kind of stuff. If you don't know how to integrate that into your business and make use of it in some sort of cost saving or revenue boosting type of way, the platform itself is interesting, but adds no ROI whatsoever. You can have
Yes.
the fanciest data warehouse on the planet, and it's not going to do anything for your business if you're not using that.
Yep, 100% agree. And that's what to clarify, when I said hire people, I meant as employees, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, like if you're the 3 6-figure positions, and then you end up with a platform that's yet to be operationalized. That's tough. Yep.
It
And then
is.
you have to maintain it as well.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say that, thinking about my day to day or week to week, I think where I kind of ended up in this position is, I really felt like I was at the right time in my career, and the right headspace for myself to just be honest and say I'm not seeing a clear picture of what my like dream job is. So can I make it myself? you know, like
Yeah.
can I set up a scenario where I'm helping people, and then my day to day is really what I want to be focused on, and that's like the three components of like innovation, helping people with helping operationalize and deliver, and then meeting new people and getting them excited about analytics and the work that we're doing. Like those three components, I think if I can kind of keep them balanced and pushing forward, to me, that's what makes up what I would define as my dream job.
No, that's great. I think you found a sweet spot. I think there's a big need, and I'm grateful to have found you. You're filling a much needed role in our industry, so thank you.
Yeah.
You did mention kind of spending time keeping your finger on the pulse of this kind of segment of our industry. Are you able to share a little bit about some emerging trends or challenges that you're seeing? Like, what is the pulse there?
I would say in the past couple years, and I have heard a couple other people in the industry kind of point to this a little bit as well. But I would say that it seemed like, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but it seemed like open source software and open source tools were like a thing, 10, 15 years ago. And then it went away, and everybody's like, you'd be crazy. Why would you give away your technology? And why would open source doesn't work, and, all this kind of stuff. And the resurgence in open source tools and open source formats and all that has really been big over the past several years. And the reason that I bring that up is what I think is exciting about it is the entry point for somebody to just try some new technology and to try different things is very low. Like the bar for implementing, and open source software used to be much more challenging too, because a lot of times it would require, if it's not a managed service, it would require a little bit of coding, a little bit of scripting, a little bit of technical expertise to kind of get it up and running and babysit it a little bit. I would say ChatGPT and large language models have really helped, because you could just say, hey, I'm interested in trying this tool. I'm not an engineer. Can you help me set it up? And you could get detailed instructions like right there on like things that, and the instructions aren't always perfect, but if you're willing to kind of like continuing going down that path, you can really try a lot of different tools, whether it's free BI dashboards, whether it's free database tools, whether it's free. I mean, there's so many opportunities out there to solve business problems with open source tools, and open source doesn't mean it's not secure. I definitely think that, security should be top of mind with where you're moving your data always. But, a lot of these tools you can run locally. You're not letting the data leave your environment, things like that. So I would just say that a trend that I continue to see, and I think we'll continue to see it. That's exciting. And I think everybody should make use of it. I think that the other trend is, what I hope, I guess the trend that I'm hoping for, maybe I'm not even seeing it all the way yet, is that we've had so much noise over AI and like it's just going to replace all the humans, and you don't need employees anymore. You can just run $1 million businesses by yourself, and all this kind of stuff. And where I think we're going to start seeing over the next year or so is, you've seen a lot of these big money backed businesses fail, already, and I think we're going to kind of come to this settling point where it's more about how do we make people doing the job better, happier, and more successful. And that's where I think that's where we're focusing on in our business, as well as is sure, are there some back office tasks and things like that you should be, automating and using AI for? 100%. I think that there's a lot of good use cases that are cost saving and everything, but I don't even know that all of us want a world where we're just like our robot, my robot's talking to your robot, and that's how we do business. I think that we're going to find that the businesses that are most successful are still putting people at the center. And I think that's where the real opportunity, and that's the trend that I think we'll see come out here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, interesting. I like your comments on the open source stuff. I do agree. It drives innovation. I think just the ease of access kind of generates more users and conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When you have paid access or more limited access in a smaller pool, people protect. That's the mentality, right? So there's less open discussion, and it also serves as a starting point too. You don't. There are tools out there. You don't have to invent the wheel and then the Ferrari. You start with the wheel,
Yep.
right? Yeah. So that's interesting. I agree with you as well. This is a conversation I feel like I have quite a bit. I think AI and machine learning serve a purpose in our life, and they're part of business, and they will continue to be. I think there are probably tools and automations and things we haven't thought of yet. There's more to come, but I think that eventually there will be a shift, especially as it becomes more accessible commercially. Ease of use is much easier. It's less expensive. It's out of the box. I think that you'll see, in industries like ours, for example, a value placed on the human aspect of it. It'll be different than it is today. You'll have agencies with virtual agents or bots, whatever you want to call them, which is great. It'll be one tool in the toolbox, but the agency that has the well-trained, compliant, live voices are going to always have a value. And especially for, we do a lot of work for hospitals and health systems. These are their patients. They're going to be patients again. Who do they want talking, to their consumers or clients? It's interesting to think about, but I think I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Fascinating world we live in, nonetheless.
It is.
Yeah.
An exciting time.
Yeah, so we're getting close on time here. I wanted to talk about just one more nugget before we wrap up. You mentioned a little bit about data scientists. So I think for those who are just beginning to explore kind of their analytics journey, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you got to kind of determine what your goals are, and then you have to have a way to move the data in a place, be able to access the data and move it somewhere where it can be analyzed, which in itself is not a small lift. And then you take it a step further where you're talking about operationalizing it. Tell us about the data scientists you work with, what their role is in this puzzle, and where data science goes from here.
So I would say, what I've learned the most about working with the data scientists that I have worked with is, 75% of what they do is analytics or analysis, or more what you would think like is data analyst type work. However, the approach to that work is much more sophisticated and much faster. They're able to really move through data much faster because of the tools that they use, just the way that they think about math and how they want to aggregate and lay out data. I just have seen them, kind of think 3 levels deeper than what you would find with an analyst. But that did demystify it a little bit for me as somebody who spent a lot of time on the analyst type roles or analytics engineering type roles. It was nice to kind of see that, they have to go through the same process that I do of figuring out, they want to be able to see some opportunity that this piece of data could be valuable or not valuable. And beyond that, they do a bunch of stuff that I would be the worst possible person to explain, other than I think a lot of what, the data science does on our team, along with other teams, is really thinking about different techniques and different approaches that they can use with the data that they have, like how sparse it is versus how much data, or how fast it needs to be processed, or how cheap it needs to be processed. There's all these kind of levers that a data scientist, particularly a senior data scientist, really thinks about kind of the big picture. That's probably how I would summarize the best data scientists that I've talked to. Is they're very good at the big picture. They're very good at thinking about innovation while they're in the middle of delivery. They're really good at thinking about, how do I share what I'm learning as widely as possible? So they're really good at writing a 1-page paper to share with the team of here's what I learned as I went through this. And I've always been very impressed with that mindset and the training and the discipline that's involved with that.
So the data scientists that you work with, how many of them, obviously they have to have some level of tech sophistication to be able to manipulate the data. Mm-hmm. Would you say they're developers? Are they making changes to the platform based on what they find, or are they sharing it with someone else who's making those tweaks?
I'd say there's definitely an engineering component of any senior data scientist, including the ones that we work with and on our team. I would say that it's honestly good. I think a good setup for data science is to really have a clear delineation between where the data science starts and where the engineering stops. And there's very good reasons for that. Number one, being able to explain to somebody that you're not allowing bias into the models is like a big one. Is like, if we only ever allow our data scientists to see anonymized data, you never have to worry about a date of birth being used, or you never have to worry about, other criteria that we don't want to use being
Sure.
used in predictions. So I think there's some intentional division there that you really do want the data scientists kind of working in that type of environment. But the reality is a lot of them have had engineering experience. Some of them may have even started as software engineers. I know one on our team, along with other ones that I've worked with, have a lot of engineering experience and are able to, have opinions about how we're bringing in data and even offer, ideas about solving it. Data scientists are very collaborative. I think it's hard for, when I see somebody hire one data scientist and it's like an operations group and then they have one data scientist, the data scientist typically ends up like doing data analyst work and then like being lonely. Like they don't have that collaboration. Be as good at they may not be as good at the operationalizing if they don't have the domain expertise. And so if they're kind of out there and just you're expecting to just like hire a data scientist to like solve all your problems,
Yeah.
I would actually encourage people to try a consultant first, and not even for selfish reasons. We've done that even for ourselves in the past of like, just bringing in somebody who has a ton of expertise, but also, I even do work where not data scientists necessarily, but other analytics managers or other director of analytics, analytics teams, even at big companies, are still pretty small a lot of times. And so I'll do a lot of work where I'm really just like a collaborator and I'm like helping be like sort of an outreach of the team to say, hey, you're not alone. Let's figure this out together, and kind of coach, about how to solve certain issues and things like that. I to summarize, I'm always impressed with the dedication of the field. Particularly the data scientists that go deep into their education and even get, PhDs and, write papers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm always impressed by the people with that level of dedication and discipline, and the fact
Yeah.
that they also have this skill set to like collaborate in a real analytics environment. I just enjoy working with them a lot. I always learn things.
How many do you know that started as a collector on a collection floor?
Zero.
See, it's like a new path, you know.
Yeah.
Instead of going to college and then to law school, you start as a collector, then you're a manager, and then you go into your actual role, data
Yeah.
scientist.
That's
Wouldn't that
right.
be great though? If you
That
could
would-
understand the, yeah,
that would be
that's
great.
great. Kind of in closing here, anything exciting? I mean, it's all exciting. We could talk for another 2 hours.
That's right.
Anything exciting that you want to share happening at Saige?
I'm just excited about all the work that we're doing right now. I think that I'm excited about all the things that we're learning about the different options with, design and architecture. I'm also probably the most excited about some of the things that we're working on the innovation side, as far as just thinking about, accuracy. We obviously, just like in any other company, wants to, have the newest and best tools and bring in AI in as many ways as we can that's responsible, which puts us in some interesting discussions about, okay, that's interesting that we got a response, but is that response the best one? Like, how do we know that how we would use things would be very explainable and have confidence in the value that's being delivered? Because that's where we spend a lot of our time. So I would say I'm most excited about, just where we are on all the options for technology and in the infrastructure and design space. And then also where I think there's a lot of things that hasn't been figured out yet. So it's fun to work on how do you know if the AI, however you're implementing it, if you're using agents, if you're getting a chat response, whatever that is, how do you know it's the best response you can get? And how do you have confidence and know that it's giving you the right answers? I think those types of questions are really exciting to work on, and that's where we're spending a lot of our time too.
That's great. I'm excited to continue our work together and to see things progress for you guys. Super exciting stuff.
Absolutely.
How do people get in touch with you?
Lucas at SaigeAnalytics.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me. A lot of times that's probably the easiest way to just find me and reach out to me. But feel free to email me directly too at Lucas at SaigeAnalytics.com.
All right, man. Thanks again for taking the time today. Great chatting with you as always.
Absolutely.
We'll talk soon.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.